You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent Fleskens, your host as always. This week we're heading back into the Suburb spotlight space. We haven't done this for a number of weeks, but I thought it would be a very interesting time to have a conversation with Clare Nation, Director of Haiven Property Central, to discuss one of our village suburbs, one of our town centres, one of our oldest centres in Perth, Subiaco. Claire, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, we've had the trifecta, just coincidentally, over the last 3 weeks now. We've had Shane Bohm, Sean Hughes, and now Clare Nation, all in the studio from Haiven. And I swear to everyone, there is nothing fishy going on here. I just wanted to talk about certain things, and you guys were available at the time. So it's really appreciated that you come in and you can talk to me today about your home, really, the place you've been working for a quarter of a century.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I first off wanted to hark back for everyone listening to episode 68, March 2020. We had your predecessor, Nikki Painker, in the studio of what was Property Exchange back in the day,
Correct.
Who was your boss, right?
Yes.
And she was the number one in Subiaco, and you've now taken the mantle over. She was talking about Subiaco in the same month that COVID was kicking off in Perth. How life has changed for us in the last 5 years.
Correct. And it's been so interesting now reflecting on that because it was such an unknown time, but we continued to work through that and we're one of the very rare agents that thought, right, okay, we're not going to take the foot off the pedal, we're going to keep going. And the market went with us.
Yeah, it was an interesting time for a lot of businesses back then, not being sure whether the world was about to fall apart. However, I can't imagine many people believed wholeheartedly that 5 years later, the value of property across Perth would essentially be, in most suburbs, 80% higher than it was when I interviewed Nikki at the time.
That is absolutely crazy.
And that has been the case for Subiaco, hasn't it? The median house price back then was
1.15.
And now?
Just under 2.
For the
just
same
under
stuff,
2.
right?
For exactly
the same house
same
in the same
things.
location. But what we do know is that 5 years ago, Subiaco really was a different feel, wasn't it? It had a bit of a funk.
Yeah, we were still in that holding pattern of something's happening. There are some proposed developments. What's that going to mean? Is that going to be a good thing for Subiaco or a bad thing for Subiaco? I think people that have lived in Subi their whole life found it very positive. People from the outer skirts that used to come to Subi for a reason had no reason to come to Subiaco anymore. So
Subiaco over was gone.
That's it. That's it. So why come to Subi? That there was not much excitement in the air, but people still loved living there because it still had that very much community feel, beautiful schools, all the treescapes, the parks, etc. But people from outer suburbs were not coming back. So it didn't have that dynamic that we have seen now in the last 5 years, that resurgence come back into Rockaby Road and Hay Street. It's a whole different feel.
Can you thank wholeheartedly and nearly totally Paul Blackburn for this change? Has he been the catalyst?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the one development really has shone a whole different light on what that bottom end of Subiaco could bring and what it's created for the culture of the area, the restaurants, the nightlife, and just feel and vibe and that buzz of the streets being full of people having breakfast on a Saturday, Sunday morning, etc. as well. So that's really changed, I think, the feel of Subiaco. People have come back to Subi now, and also it gave everybody another opportunity if they have loved and lived in Subi for such a long time of somewhere that they could call home in a sense of a more impactful lifestyle. They could have their apartment living and things like that.
I think it's the perfect example for people who are the naysayers, the NIMBYs, and there have been many in Subiaco who are scared of change. Fear is one of those emotions that drives us most a lot of the time, and it's a perfect example where Nikki was on the podcast talking about Subiaco markets and what used to be there, and that it's obviously run down and nothing was happening at the time, and how this One Subiaco's coming in at some point. So there was really this trepidation of we don't know what it's going to be and whether everyone's going to accept it, but what we do know is when it's done well, when it's done in the right locations, no matter the scale, no matter the height, it's a positive for the area. And what I think we can say with confidence, and we know out of just property values in this location, in this development, let alone around it, that it has been a success. But even if you added another 10 stories to this building, it would not have been a negative outcome.
Absolutely not. And even when you have a look at the growth of those apartments in that development, people are still very keen to be getting into that complex.
You just sold an apartment in there,
We've just sold a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, northeast facing. The clientele that I had there through the weekend, some of those have been looking since they bought them off plan. They were like, I should have bought back in here in the day. I've still been thinking about it. Interestingly enough, we did have a strong farmer demographic. We have just recently sold that, and they were farmers from Cunderdin.
So they're like a bolt hole for when they're popping into Perth.
Yes, for them it's all about lifestyle and location. So Subiaco was their number one choice for lifestyle and location out of all of Perth. And it was still that lock and leave. They still had the beautiful views, and it just ticked all of their boxes. And when we look at that growth, that particular apartment from when my client had bought that off plan, we're talking 27% growth from when she had bought it in 2020. And that's for an apartment. And we couldn't say that for many years in Subiaco.
What was going the other way?
Where we were going backwards. And now we see that knock-on effect from what I feel that One has created, even with our 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartments, which used to hover from that 550, 580. Now they're in the 700 to 800s. So we've seen a huge, I feel, a growth in apartment living. And I think it does come down to the fact that Subiaco has all the amenities now to be able to underpin that really location lifestyle living in that village.
It's revived. And
absolutely.
I think it's been sitting there as that sleeping giant in times where it obviously went backwards after Subiaco. But then COVID, I think, was a blessing along with One Subiaco for the suburb, because it feels to me, and I certainly have embraced this, that since COVID, we're playing more board games, we're going to more cafes, we're getting out into nature a bit more, and we want to be around people and around the community. And there really is no better village, in my opinion, than Subi in Western Australia. And so it was just sitting there ready to burst out. And all those fantastic amenities that have been waiting there with for lease signs in front of them have allowed for that creativity and that optionality and the amenity to come back.
Oh, we have. So Subi is very blessed in the sense that we have people upsizing into Subiaco and we have downsizing into Subiaco. Because of our block sizes, that we don't get to have large blocks. But if people are coming in from, let's say, Nedlands, Claremont, from their 1,012 square metre blocks, they might be downsizing into a smaller block and they're moving there for lifestyle. They're wanting to be near all the cafe strips and the restaurants. Still want to have a little bit of space, but they don't want their 1,000 square metres. But then we have the younger families now coming into Subi.
Stretching.
Absolutely. And they're happy on their 450 to 600 square metre block.
Well, probably all they could afford and expect to afford these days.
You look at the other suburbs surrounding, like Wembley, that have bigger blocks, etc., and that used to be the poorer cousin of Subi, which is no longer the case.
Isn't that crazy?
There's no poor cousin anywhere anymore, but they do have the bigger blocks, which they can offer. But we bring it back to that village feeling of community, and you have those beautiful tree-lined streets in Subi.
People will trade the back 15 metres of their backyard for the walk score.
That's it.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, looking at who's coming in and buying in Subiaco, are they coming from over east, overseas? A lot of people buying in Subi are living in Subi. So they are so used to having all that convenience that they don't want to trade that for anywhere else.
Could you characterise who's selling right now?
There was a time we did have a little bit of a run of people downsizing, going into homes or estates, etc. We've got the ability in Subi for people to downsize and upsize. So they may have done a beautiful renovation on a 500 square metre block and they're selling now to go into the western suburbs on a larger scale block. So it's actually a very broad range.
It's quite transient.
It's very transient, and I think that comes down to the fact that we have such different styles of property. And I think Nikki even referenced this in your previous podcast. It is quite rare now to find that untouched gem in Subi. And if we find it, we have a huge amount of response for it. There was one that we recently sold last year on Keatley Road in Shenton Park. We couldn't even have a home open there. It was in such a bad state, and holes in floors and ceilings, etc. And the amount of interest on just that particular style of property for people to come and renovate back then was huge.
We know that's still a case today. Renovation is, even Shane said it a couple of weeks ago, is certainly at the fore still. We know that Tim Reardon, HIA chief economist, said it only 3 weeks ago, that renovation is absolutely a key part of our renewal of new supply, if that's even what we want to call it. But it's very expensive as well to do. Margins in the renovation space are very expensive these days, or very high.
That's why, Trent, we are seeing people pay premium for completely renovated homes.
Yeah.
So when we are looking in Subiaco, and we are looking now at properties selling circa 3 mil or low twos or into that mid-3 range, they have been renovated from top to toe. There is no money to be spent, and people will pay for that.
So that convenience.
That convenience. And remembering, again, our demographic in Subiaco isn't that of perhaps a tradie demographic. So we've got our doctors and our lawyers, like all these guys, clients that would be happy to come in and have the work done for them, then actually spend their weekends doing all that work and trade themselves. So they will pay for that privilege. So that's why we've seen that price point in the market go to that next level, because they are prepared to pay for not having to do all of that work.
We briefly mentioned their doctors, and we know that for me, doctors is synonymous with the suburb Shenton Park. How is Subiaco's growth? And we know Shenton Park has been an absolute star over the last few years in terms of time on the market and growth. How does it relate? When Shenton Park does well, does it spill over to Subiaco, or do they compete with each other?
They're on par. I don't think Shenton Park has diverse accommodation than Subi. When we look at Subi, we've got 1950 one-bedroom apartment blocks. We've got one-bedroom, two-bedroom, three-bedroom apartments, brand-new complexes, older complexes. Shenton Park doesn't offer that, so it does offer more homes. So you do find that you will get families that are really quite keen to be near Rosalie Primary and Shenton College. Obviously now we've got Shenton College and Bob Hawke College. So there are those school parameters that people like to work in, and you've got the hospital. So we do have those younger doctors coming in potentially in that $1 to $2 million price range now, and then they will then still buy in that area, but then they may be going from that 2+ into more of a family home.
Let's talk about buying then and get real about what it takes to buy these housing types that you've just mentioned there. What's the cheapest thing I can now buy in Subiaco?
You are looking at the outer edge of Subi, probably close or backing onto a train line. The old Subiaco Road apartments, even those now are really heading into the 400-500s.
The old flats, essentially.
The old flats.
Yep.
On that, it used to be that area that was probably not to taste as much, but because you have also now that West Leederville pocket of Besk and the Highland Bar and all of those places, and you've got the ability to go to that West Leederville train station, those areas are really quite high in demand again. We will look at having Subiaco East, which is going to connect the city into Subi even more, and that's also going to be able to provide another diverse product of retail commercial.
They will be brand new. They'd be pretty expensive, wouldn't they?
It will be apartments, it will be terraces, it will be all sorts, but that will then connect Subi into that area, so that will build that little pocket even more so.
Step up a level, we then go into the $600,000, $800,000 space. What's there in that price point?
2x1 apartments, 2x2 apartments. No longer will you get a townhouse for that price point. Our townhouses have now gone into the 8, 9, even over $1 million.
And when you say townhouses, are you talking the older stuff in East Subiaco? We're talking about the newer Dress Circle,
we're
closer to
not talking
Bunny?
Centro, no, we're not talking around there. We're still talking about maybe potentially Dennis Streets and Little Roland Street, Bagot Road, Barker Road, those
Busier
locations.
streets, yeah.
Busier streets, but they have the location. And they've had probably light renovations, not full gut or anything like that, but just a nice tidy up. Very much probably now sitting in that 850 plus range.
Now, if I wanted a small family home, original, what's my entry level there now?
High ones.
Yeah, so there's a big gap. Is there anything in the mid to low one?
In the mid to low ones, we can reference a lot of the little 2-bedroom cottages, which some of them are sitting on 185 square metres, 200 square metres. Like you're looking at, recently we just sold a property at 107 Park Street, which we only sold 18 months ago for $943, and we've just recently sold that again for 1.2. Same condition, top location.
Yep.
But beautiful character, heritage. That's your first home buyers now coming into the market. So that is where you may have that younger couple coming into the market that they don't want to have potential strata.
Double income, no kids.
Correct,
Yep.
correct. And no parking, so they're not too bothered about that. They may be only having one car bay. That low end of the ones now is very rare. So the low ends of the ones now are probably your townhouses, your 3x2 townhouses. But to actually look at getting yourself a 3x1 house, I'd say if you're achieving something in the mid ones, you're doing very well. But that it's now gone mid ones to probably the high ones.
The median, as you said, is essentially $2 million now. So what is that median house that you're getting for $2 million? Is it a 3x1 close to Barker or Bagot in those areas?
You could be getting maybe a nice, on a small block, we're talking maybe a high 3 block, a 3x2 that has been renovated. If you're looking more in a nice, beautiful character street like Heytesbury, Gloucester, you are looking at probably a 3x1 that needs a whole lot of renovation. We recently sold on Heytesbury Road a 484 square metre block for 2.1. That was an original 1950s house. So again, there is a lot of different answers for these questions depending on the area that they are in Subiaco and what they have to offer.
The most expensive property sold was on Union Street, wasn't it?
Yes.
That went above $4 million.
Above $4 million.
Do you think we're going to start seeing properties selling in that range? Are there enough properties worth that in terms of just the house size and quality in Subiaco, or was that a one-off?
There'll be a small pool of properties, I believe, that will work into that area. Now we are seeing a lot more sales into that $3 million mark. Sales in $3 million now, I believe, are likely to be, again, of a high-quality renovation on a bigger block. So the block size in Subiaco is really strongly underpinning that $3 million sale. And with that location in some particular areas, people do see premium there. But again, it is going to come down to that finished product and that wow effect and that lack of having to spend any more money on these properties.
Now, I know there are heritage laws in the area, but are we seeing many people knocking houses down and rebuilding?
No.
Why?
I think people love the charm of Subiaco. They move to Subi for that character feel, and that is what has enticed them to that area. So we want to be able to maintain that, I feel, as much as possible, and that has been upheld in most of the area. Very rarely are we seeing someone buy a home to demolish and to rebuild. If you're spending 2.1 and then you're going to probably likely have to build to spend another 2 on that.
You're hitting a record. It does make sense, but I could also imagine in areas like this, money starts to become less of a pressure point for some people as well. We are on the precipice of the Golden Triangle now, where people are just building and spending what they want for the outcome they're looking for in the area they want it to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing records falling again. Specific buyers who are not price sensitive but just want the outcome for their life as well. That's a reality for everywhere Subiaco West, I think.
I feel that also that generational wealth that is flowing down into the market now, we're going to see a very strong impact of that being in areas like Subiaco. If they're coming from potentially the western suburbs and still wanting to be close to mum and dad and grandparents, to be able to get the kids into a really good quality area and help them out with that extra $500,000.
Whatever the guarantee might be.
Whatever it may well be. We went through a big stage at the end of last year. We were selling a lot of property that had the bank of mum and dad topping it up just to get them into that better street, that potential of being close to their parents.
Talking about being sensitive to price as a young person getting in, we know the interest rates are dropping. They're about to drop again in July, and they're forecast to continue to drop a couple more times this year. Have you seen the dynamic of what buyers are offering be affected by that in a place like Subiaco? Or is it less sensitive to the loan?
Less sensitive, I feel. I don't feel it has been impactful. Even when the interest rates went up and as they come down, I feel that we have less impact in this area. The greater impact of seeing first home buyers is more so what happened in the rental market and the fact that they couldn't rent, they had to buy. And again, Bank of Mum and Dad were coming in and saying, we need to get you into this market. The rents are too expensive. And where we were seeing investors come in and buying those $350,000 to $500,000 apartments, our first home buyers jumped onto those.
Interesting. So the rental market has fueled the sales market in Subiaco.
I feel most definitely.
Yeah, and look, that is generally the free market, how it works, right? When it gets too expensive to justify renting, as long as you've got a deposit, you may as well buy. And those people that have bought, especially 5 years ago, have made a very smart decision to do that. Rents have essentially doubled.
That's right.
So eventually, if you're living there and you've got the means to make the purchase, you would have by now.
Well, we're seeing medium rentals at $1,000 a week. Recently, we just sold a little 2x1 on Roberts Road, terrace, a block of 8, quite small bedrooms. Previously been renting at that 700 range, and we just had multiple applications at 865.
Yeah. The irony is not a lot of people can afford that by themselves. So
No.
It's couples, it's people sharing, and a lot of investors, landlords are having to accept that as the reality these days if they want those prices. We know that One Subiaco has made a big difference. We know Elysium has been a beautiful development on Rockaby Road as well. Are there any others that you're looking to? We mentioned the developments around Kitchener, but also Lords as well, the developments happening there. Are we seeing that as something that people believe is going to make a big impact on the amenity, or is it simply more options?
A lot of those ones around Lords they're built to rent, so they're custom made for rentals. I don't feel that really impacts the value across the board whatsoever.
Does it take a bit of pressure off the rental market?
You'd like to think that it has to, but we're not seeing that. I think population growth is still...
It's just being soaked up.
It's just being absolutely... And it's also still such an area that people, if they're coming into Perth or they're relocating from east, they'll look at Subi and they'll look at proximity to the city, proximity to the ocean, what it has to offer. And it is a prime space to be living.
Yeah, so it will just be at the expense of other suburbs at the worst, rather than be left vacant or dropping median prices in the area. Because essentially what we know from economics is that when there's more supply, it helps bring prices down. But that's not the case if you're at the top of the amenity pyramid, where people are continually grappling up towards you anyway.
Correct.
There will always be that pressure.
Correct.
And I guess that thought is exacerbated with the new supply that will come on in the PMH development space around Kitchener as well. There's a lot of supply coming on there, right? At some point in time, it's not now, it's not next year, it's not even the year after. We know this is years away before this stuff gets built. But at some point, we're going to have a few thousand extra people renting and living.
Right. But I feel
surely that impacts the way that the fabric of Subiaco works. With that many new people, we're going to need a new shopping centre.
Yes. I just feel it wasn't that long ago, and that Nikki and I was having conversations with ourselves going, stop building these apartments, we can't sell them. And then overnight that completely changed. But I also feel the type of product that was being put out there, and again, Paul had a very big driving force on this, and when he was talking about what does Subiaco need
Setting
and want from an apartment perspective. We don't need one-bedroom apartments. I need a terrace where our downsizers can entertain family. We need to have that third bedroom. We don't need to have the one bedrooms, but we will constantly see, I think, the demand outweigh the supply in these areas.
12 months from now, the median house price in Subiaco, is it the same, lower or higher than today?
We'll continue to increase, I believe, in Subiaco. We might find apartments have a bit more stability, which is normal. So I think the apartment market had a bit of a boom. I feel that we won't be going backwards in any style of property in Subiaco.
I think for prices to go backwards, sellers have to need to sell more than buyers have to need to buy. And that doesn't seem to be the case across anywhere in Perth at the moment, especially places where people really want to live, like Subiaco.
That's right.
Clare Nation, Director of Haiven Property Central, I really appreciate your time today. It's been an insightful update on a great foundation that Nikki provided 5 years ago now. Thank you for your time and sharing your very candid and local expertise in one of our favourite suburbs in Perth, Subiaco.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!